oh my, how strange. The presence of Oni-chan and his friends have disappeared. Oh my, you're right. They're surely with the Mad Hatter. You won't be able to find them so quickly. Kusu, how foolish. Trying to buy time like this is pointless. Kusu, it sure is. They can't stop us as long as Oni-chan is still alive. And thus, the tea party begins. Looks like one of the seats is empty. Do we really have everyone here? Is he late? Well, he's normally quite loose with time, so let's continue our conversation without worrying about him. Really? Is that okay? I thought I heard something about needing to assemble all the guests as a minimum requirement for defeating Abaddon. He's not exactly a guest. Let's call him a collaborator. He already knows what's going on, so there's no need for me to explain anything to him. Now let's see, where shall I begin? First of all, let me explain the nature and objective of the twins of Abaddon. Tell me, what's your awareness of the entity called Abaddon? Even the speculation you've heard up until now will do. Let's see. He's a demon that eats worlds, and whose natural form is similar to that of a black hole. But he was originally a being whose duty was to tidy up dead and dying worlds, not to indiscriminately devour any and all worlds. Yes, those are both right. Abaddon is not in his right mind anymore. You could say he's completely out of control now. Out of control? As for the cause of his rampage, it began after he acquired the doll bodies of those twins. They're a biological weapon created by MOW in the distant future. They were born as a result of an accident in the process of intervention research. Yes, MOW again! If there's anything wrong, it's MOW. Kazuya's gonna grow up being like Timmy's dad towards Dingleberg. He'll just be like, MOW. Intervention? Before the events surrounding you happened, Kazuya-kun, the organization had a keen interest in meddling with our dimensions. That included the ability of a demon to perceive them. After many years of research, they found the answer they were looking for, but the Lost Number project ended in failure because they were unable to control Abaddon. What's this intervention? You mean intervene, like to get involved in someone's business? It's an ability that gives you the authority to decide the actions of certain individuals in other worlds. In other words, it allows one to meddle in the ongoings of other worlds. One cannot change their own fate. Using intervention, however, someone can change the course of events and crush small singularities that arise. In all affected worlds, this is done secretly, without exception. Any affected individuals would live normally without the knowledge that any changes have been made. At least, that's what's supposed to happen. But there are rare exceptions where the targets of intervention learn what's happening. Are you saying that I was one of those rare occasions? No, Kazuya-kun. In your case, you had to know, so you could reach that conclusion. But of course the guests here aren't aware of what's happened with you, so let's talk about the chronological order of this intervention. The intervention's chronological order? Get ready to break out your charts, boys. It's timeline following. First, there was the original world line. The world in which you lost to Iron Maiden and ended up captured by her. In that world, you never escaped from the city, let alone the shelter, and spent the rest of your life trapped in there. That was your fate. That is where someone's powerful will was applied, and the fate of the world changed greatly. And that is also when our intervention in this world began. Was this will from some kind of higher being? Like someone with the authority of that world's god or creator? No, it was just a single human. That's why I didn't take it seriously at first. I thought it was just a trivial change. But the truth was different. Depending on the situation, it even created world lines where Kazuya escaped the city and survived for a long time afterwards. Kazuya himself is kind and possesses a strong will of his own, but he also has superior perception and insight. I think that is why he was chosen to be an intervention target. But there was no good ending at this stage. Someone was missing. The survivors were missing something as well. At that point, because you weren't yet aware of the existence of intervention, there were demons you couldn't save, and demons you couldn't get through to. Yes. For example, you cannot save Mukuro or Titanoboa, or even Daji, without the power of intervention. You have to have intervention to get to Mukuro, to save Hyaki, who then in turn helps you save Titanoboa. And only once you have everyone else can you save Daji. But there would be one demon who would change all that. Hyaki. That Oni came to learn about intervention through various circumstances. Even I was surprised when Mad Hatter told me about them. And so she ended up spilling the beans to Kazuya about intervention. She intentionally caused something that originally could never have occurred. Intentionally? I mean, by the time she told us about it, we'd already performed intervention twice. And really, with that note she left, she was talking to the player. And then she just spelled it out for Kazuya. She didn't go out of her way, really, to lead Kazuya down that path. As a result, the world was born where Mukuro was saved from Abaddon, Titanoboa saved her own life, and Reina was rescued. That is the world line that Kazuya-kun is in. A world line at a certain place called True Mercy. To be honest, that scared me. It was a route that diverged significantly from the original line, and it wouldn't have been unusual to have paradox phenomena occurring, causing chaos and turmoil. But the world and the beginning that resides above me But the world and the being that resides above me made it the official timeline. The True Mercy world itself was recognized as the correct one. But why? It had greatly diverged from the original correct timeline, hadn't it? Isn't it the job of people like you to fix that? I'm just an intervention medium. I don't know the reasons why they did it. Perhaps this new world line is the starting point for something important in the future. Or perhaps the original world itself had something wrong with it. Either way, this is where my role ended, with With the True Mercy timeline having been made the official one, I have no further reason to intervene. Or at least, that's what was supposed to happen. Sorry to interrupt you, but all this talk of world lines and official timelines is making my head spin. Am I the only one having trouble keeping up? Making your head spin? This is literally following along with a chart. Keep up, Mizuki. To be honest, this isn't the first time we dealt with things like parallel worlds. I'm amazed he was able to explain it so well. It's certainly hard to wrap your head around. Hey, you understand this? Your face is blank. That's rude, Orthros. That's just how those silent types are. You wise big brother. I understand. So, can we take the fact that you remained here like this to mean something happened? Your duty was over, and you were not supposed to have any further need to intervene. And what connection does this all have to Abaddon's rampage? This isn't a simple story, so I'll continue to explain a little more of the events in order. The power of intervention birthed a world line in which Kazuya can survive. However, that in itself wasn't necessarily a good thing to happen. As I said before, intervention is a function that gives decision-making authority to a third party, and the decisions that get made with that authority aren't necessarily always the best. Normally, that's where an intervention medium like me would remove the option of that possibility and put a stop to the whole thing. But that wasn't possible this time. An entity that had its eyes on this situation for a very long time was already a step ahead. In contrast to Hyaki, Abaddon and those who obey that had a keen interest in a certain possibility, the Geno route. They had already started moving before I could act, which is why even I wasn't able to suppress them. Obey that? You mean Abaddon's not the ringleader behind all this? I told you before, didn't I? Abaddon's just out of control right now. The one who manipulated Abaddon from the shadows to Rampage is the culprit this time. If I remember correctly, Kazuya-kun calls it that. It's that black, muddy thing. I see. You already had a run-in with it during the Hecate incident, didn't you? Then you should be able to sense it. You could say that what you saw back then was both it and yet not it. It's an evil deity that has no name. It's an entity that calls itself Old One, as a reference to myths and legends of Cthulhu. Old One? You're not saying it right. The text isn't all out of a mistake. You need to work on your pronunciation there, Kazuya. As I said, it has no proper name of its own. If I had to compare it to something, it's like an impossibly huge body of liquid that has no means of materializing itself. In order for it to truly materialize, it must be feared and have religious faith to make sense of it. It also needs a vessel that it can take control of. And it had its eye on you as its vessel, Kazuya-kun. Your parents had raised you to be its vessel ever since you were a young child. It was going to be their way of welcoming the arrival of their deity. And though the ceremony itself failed, your inherent quality as its vessel was unchanged. That's what the Messiah Project was trying to take advantage of. The old one had you in its sights for a very long time. It's been vigilantly waiting for just the right time to enter your body. But ultimately, your fate was to die, and no matter which world line it turned to, it would never have its chance. That is, until intervention happened. Don't tell me. It used intervention for its own benefit to revive Kazuya as its vessel? That's exactly right! The old one made available a certain option, a path that would awaken Kazuya-kun, using Arachne to forcefully awaken him if he went down the Geno route. Specifically, that path was to slaughter the demons he met out of malice, so that he would swell with magic power. Normally you would think that's a path someone would choose, but Mad Hatters underestimated how many interveners existed who would follow a path like that. Allow me to clarify something here. It's not that Kazuya using self-defense and killing some monsters is necessarily bad. It doesn't lead to the true mercy route, sure, but it's not necessarily bad. It's not what the twins or Abaddon or Old One want. What they need is for Kazuya specifically to kill demons because he hates them. That is what gets him to awaken as a vessel for Old One. Abaddon, using the twins as an intermediary, used their invention to create a timeline separate from the one Mad Hatter had created. Yes, this is why the timeline that you get explained if you follow True Mercy is so drastically different from the timeline that you would get if you went down the Geno route. They are specifically two different timelines. Ceremony succeeded, seeds of malice implanted, versus the timeline that Mad Hatter had created. Fully manifest as Old One after escaping. Abaddon went even further back in time to create a world line where the ceremony conducted when Kazuya-kun was a child was successful. It created an impetus to readily kill others within his normally kind self. That path was an irregular world line that neither I nor the being above me attended at all. Left alone, it would inevitably cause destructive paradoxes to occur. That would allow that deity to manifest, and using Abaddon, it could cause even more destruction of the world. But there is little I can do about that on my own. But that ultimately didn't happen. All thanks to Hyaki. Kazuya-kun, do you remember what you made Hyaki promise in my room? You made her promise that should you ever be in a timeline where you're killing everyone, that she would stop you, even if she had to kill you to do it. That was a promise she kept. Yep. That's why she faces you down at the end of the Geno route. I'm sure she waited until the last possible moment to do it. She knew how kind you were. She waited till there was no going back, believing that you'd stop your rampage. She then brought you back to life to try to avoid a paradox event occurring in that standalone timeline, in a way that would separate you from the intervener's interventions. That effectively put a stop to the Old One's plans. Though that separate timeline remained, the Old One was stopped from intervening in it. Thus, it was mission accomplished as far as using intervention to course correct the timeline. The other world lines were stabilized as official parallel worlds, and the issue was resolved. At least that's the preface to Abaddon's story. Is all this making sense so far? Sort of. You don't have to look so hung up about Mizuki-chan. I barely understand a word. It's not that, Yami-chan.